What's up guys, Jordan here today with my review of Deep Sky Derelicts Definitive Edition. I'm going to tell you why fans of Darkest Dungeon and Slay the Spire are definitely going to want to keep their eyes on this one. Now I'm not going to lie, this is a game that I would not normally review, but the stars somehow aligned and it ended up in my lap, voluntarily of course. Why would I not normally review this game? Well, because as some of you guys know, I am highly allergic to card games. Yes, they make me come out in a rash of irrational disapproval. Don't worry, it's not contagious. But anyways, tangents and made up medical conditions aside, I am actually quite glad I ended up with this one. Yes, I'm very surprised. The story of Deep Sky Derelict is slightly unceremonious. You start the game, generate 3 random but editable crew members, and off you pops. You're in the game and have been told to find an almost mythical mothership out in space amongst the vast array of derelict spacecraft that litter the galaxy. If you do so, you will be granted citizenship to a world, something which you and your crew like. From here, you travel to various wrecks in search of clues as to where the mothership lies. The story is minimal and almost cold. I was a bit taken aback at first, but a cold, heartless nature is a theme throughout the game, and it seemed to fit it perfectly. The little moments found in each of the derelicts, conversations with weird broken robots, convicts, or treasure hunters was enough to keep me happy. Deep Sky Derelict is a very old school type of game. It's a dungeon crawler to put it basically, but the old schoolness runs deeper than that. While it does have visuals, as you can see, the way they've gone about it almost reminds me of those old text adventure type of games like Zork. You move your squad of 3 around the dungeons in a very impersonal way. It's all done from a monochrome sterile map screen as you move them on a grid. Each grid signifies a room of sorts. Yes, you can actually look at the room and the brilliant environmental artwork that they may hold, but you do feel slightly distant from the exploration side of the game. No matter how many hours I went through the game, I could never stop being bemused that you need to press start to access a menu in order to move your team every time. It gives a great feeling of trepidation as you can only see what you've already explored. You can send out a radar signal to reveal a bit more in front of you, and this is very useful for finding where monsters lie or which direction has some juicy loot or quest markers, but it does use up energy, and energy is a major resource in this game. When you begin the game, you only have 1000 units of energy. Each step you take in the wrecks will use up some of it. The amount used can vary depending on the environment and if you're walking normally, stealthily to avoid encounters, or rushing through. Not only that though, as battle actions take up some of it too. What I'm trying to say is that you only have a bit and it tends to run out pretty quickly if you're not careful. If you start running low, then you need to head back to the transport ship and your home base to pay up and replenish it. I never did find out what happens when you run out mid-level since I'm far too cautious for that, but it's probably not something that's desirable. As mentioned in a terrible attempt at comedy from myself, Deep Sky Derelict has cards within its battle system. I don't know how or why card draws became so popular within the indie RPG scene, but I can't say that I'm thankful. Anyways, each of your characters, depending on which class they are, will have some cards already at their disposal, attacking and supporting. When you level up and head on down the skill tree, you can also add some more. Most of the cards, however, will come from equipment you have and the mods placed upon them. Battles are turn-based. Each of your fighters gets 3 or 4 cards drawn per turn, and they have to choose which one suits their situation best. This, of course, means that you can't always do your favorite attack, nor do a specific thing that you may really need to do, like heal. There's a lot of RNG and deck building needed. There are a dizzying amount of cards and attacks, all doing all sorts of stuff with numbers, percentages, clauses, effects. It's a lot of numbers pulled out of a lot of arses, but somehow it works. It just works. It's fun, it's tactical, occasionally frustrating, and eternally bewildering. I can't say I approve, but I concede. It comes together and it works. If that's not flummoxing enough, then perhaps turn your attention to the equipment and inventory system, which is just a kaleidoscope of nonsense. You have slots for weapons as well as tools, each of which has slots for a couple of mods. Finding which one should go in which place, and if that one is better than this one, you'll start coming out in a cold sweat. It's just crazy because not everything can fit together. But to give the developers some credit, they really did try something interesting to combat which tools and mods can combine by using different color codings and hilariously minute shape variations of the slots. It's still an absolute nightmare though. Thankfully, you can press a button to do a quick view of which mods are only compatible with the tool or weapon you're on, but in all honesty, this should have been the default way of showing. And again, the equipment is a vomit fountain of numbers, and trying to compare which mods are slightly better than others is a chore. I mean, do I really want 6% extra damage, or do I want the 4% extra damage with a 12% stun thing? I don't know. But sadly, it is quite important to keep your crew on top of things. Getting new equipment and better cards, leveling up and applying mods, is the key to getting by in this game. I wouldn't say it's a tough game. I mean, it has its moments, but it's more of a slow game than a tough game. Very meandering, making each step count, making sure all your equipment is up to scratch. I found it hard at first, but once I adjusted my playstyle to appreciate the slow nature, I found it much easier in the long run. Now I know it sounds like I'm complaining, but in actuality, Deep Sky Derelicts comes together very well indeed. What the game set out to do, it was achieved excellently. You do very much feel like an explorer, a scavenger in the cold, dangerous depths of space. The exploration is incredibly tense. It's engaging despite being done from a menu basically. The combat, despite being at the will of the gods and having the occasionally unnecessarily exhaustive card description, the gameplay comes together well and is engaging and visually very pleasing. It is a good game. If you're into games such as Darkest Dungeon and Slay the Spire, this will be to your taste, I am sure. Now the visuals for me are what really charmed me. The style is of 80s comic books pretty much, and it works very well indeed. The color palette is lowish, but the designs and the lines are bold. There's some great sci-fi stuff in here. A bit of Star Wars, a bit of Aliens. The artists who worked on this did a fantastic job. Yes, many of the room designs are repeated, but considering there are probably like 1,000 rooms in this game, I was actually surprised at just how many different ones there were. I love the presentation too, like the attacks are in comic book panel style and just awesome with their over-the-top poses and minimal animation. In terms of performance, obviously a game like this runs well on the Switch, but interestingly, after delving into the options menu, I did notice that you can choose between 30 and 60 frames per second, with 30 being the default. I tried both and I literally couldn't tell the difference, but it's an option for those who are more sensitive than myself. The audio is top notch. I really enjoyed the soundtrack for this one. It's a lo-fi synth wave job and it is very prominent in the mix. It's really powerful and adds so much atmosphere to the game. The composer of this one has done a fantastic job in helping the presentation feel really very good. It's moody, chilled, tense. The soundtrack for this one just about has it all. The publisher 1C Entertainment are asking for £22.49 and £24.99 in euros and US dollars. That's on the premium end for an indie game, but not unheard of for this style. Yes, it seems the publisher has done their research and you'll find games of similar ilk like Slay the Spire and Darkest Dungeon being around the same price or even higher. While I personally can't compare this to those, it does strike me as a little bit ambitious. Yes, this is a game that can be played many times with different class builds, but I think after the 20 hours or so campaign, you'll probably have had your fill of what Deep Sky has to offer. One nice thing, I suppose, is that this is the definitive edition. All the DLC and quality of life updates that the PC version got are all present here. But still, I would have liked to seen this a couple of pounds cheaper. $20 would have been a sweet price for this. As of the time of this review, I don't believe a physical release of this one has been announced, but to be honest, this seems like it could get one in the future. It seems like the type of game that Super Rare Games would love to add to their catalogue. Overall, Deep Sky Derelicts Definitive Edition is a game that took me by surprise. I was expecting to have to review a total slog of a game in a genre that I don't particularly enjoy, but I came out pleasantly surprised and did enjoy playing it despite the often bewildering amount of numbers and ill thought out equipment system. Perhaps it's the presentation I enjoyed more than the gameplay. The comic book art style mixed with the lo-fi synth wave soundtrack made for a very compelling experience. The exploration is minimally presented but has a surprisingly profound effect on the vibe that you get from the game. There is depth here no matter how much I try to fight it. If you're looking for a slow-paced dungeon crawler, then this may be a good one for you. It was never brilliant for me, just pretty good, better than expected. The price could have been a smidge lower though, a 7 out of 10. Okay guys, if you're into this game, also perhaps check out Luke's review of Alder's Blood, which has a similar kind of vibe, and perhaps check out our old review of Steam World Quest, which also has a similar type of gameplay. And of course, my weekly physicals releases video every Monday. Be there to get all the latest news on the Switch releases every week. Take care.